So I'm going to do a video now, which is a video I've been meaning to do for a long time. And hopefully this will be an important and enlightening one because I think it's about time to do it, which is really to state what my economic views are and to explain them in a way that makes sense. And also to rebut certain common arguments against the views that I have. So basically, okay, I'm going to first admit I'm not an economist. I haven't really read any formal books on economics per se. Like I've read some of Kunstler's books which delve into economics to a degree, but nothing that's like actual economic theory. So I could not tell you, for instance, what like the Austrian school or the French school or the Birmingham school. I'm just making shit up at this point. Those don't even exist. But my point is, yeah, I can't tell you necessarily the definition of every formal economic ideology. Like if you ask me what is dirigism or what is distributism or whatever, like I could not honestly tell you what half these things are. But that being said, I do think I have a certain sense of what works and what doesn't work in an economic sense and a social sense because I have traveled across many countries and I've seen the way things are in many countries. So I think I'm well enough informed to at least have an opinion. So this is basically what I believe. What I believe is in essentially an economic system that is basically, in an economic sense, left of center, more socialist than capitalist, but not full on socialist, like not like Venezuela tier socialism. I would say probably ideally a system close to what much of Europe has right now. Similar to the European systems in various, I'm not sure which European country has the best system. Like I hear a lot of people say that Scandinavia has a really great economic system. I hear other people say like Netherlands, Germany. I would say probably one of those countries, like probably the Germanic countries of continental Europe would be the ones that have probably the best economic model, but really anywhere in Europe, almost anywhere in Europe, I'd say has a much better model than we do here in North America. And that's because I believe that the true health of a society should be measured not just in GDP per capita, but in actual quality of life. And I think in that regard, the Europeans have us beat. I think the issue with the North American system is if all you care about is having a really big house and a really big car, then the North American system is probably the best system for you to prosper in. But if you want stuff that's like not as expensive as a big house and a big car, but still nice, like say if you want to be able to have a decent home for yourself and to be able to travel, for instance, I'd say the European system's much better because in the North American system, you get hardly any time off from work. And my question is, what's the point of all that money if you have hardly any time to spend it? It's like, what? Oh, just, take vacations when you're retired. It's like, okay, but by the time I'm 65, the world is probably going to be a shithole that is totally unrecognizable from what it is today. Will anywhere even still be worth traveling to by then? So obviously that's bullshit. So I do reject the entire concept of the American dream, the entire idea that like the life is only about work and accumulating wealth and having a big house and a big car. I think I am a very much a dyed-in-the-wool millennial insofar as I believe that experiences are often more valuable than things. Like, yes, you should have a home. You should have basic necessities. You should have possessions that you need to survive and to have a decent quality of life. But do you need a 4,000 square foot mansion? No. In my opinion, nobody really needs that shit. So I guess my economic views are largely informed by the type of society that I idealize. And in my opinion, European society, it's not perfect. Like European society has its problems, but as far as economics goes, and as far as like the general attitude toward work-life balance, I think Europe has a much healthier economic system than we do in North America. So, what are some criticisms that I get from other people on the right? Like, I'm not going to talk about the criticisms that I get from leftists in this regard, like, because frankly, who cares? Like, they'll always be like, oh, you're not socialist enough. You're really just a capitalist pretending to be a socialist. They will say this to any person with socially right-wing views. They will say that no, 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 secretly you want a McDonald's on every corner. Secretly um you want Goldman Sachs and all the oil companies to control everything. It's like, actually, no, I don't. And it's bullshit to say I do. No, I'm not a communist. I'm not as socialist as they are. I never claimed to be. But to say that I'm like secretly a libertarian is just flat out fucking bullshit. To say that I'm secretly an unmitigated free market capitalist is fucking bullshit. And frankly, it doesn't even merit discussion. So I'm going to instead address the criticisms from right wingers who are basically more economically libertarian than me. The first criticism is the complete ad hominem deflection. Well, it's not ad hominem per se. Sorry, that's the wrong fallacy. But it's a complete deflection by saying Europe is really cucked in terms of its social policies, so therefore European economic policies don't work. That's a false conflation. It's saying you can't have Swedish economics without also having Swedish immigration system. That's bullshit. You can in fact have Swedish economics without having a Swedish style immigration system. And there's no reason why one has to be accompanied by the other. In fact, I mean, like throughout European history, there have been regimes that were literally fascist that had economic systems not so dissimilar from Scandinavian countries today. So that is completely a false conflation, and it's just bullshit. It's like saying like, oh, you want to be like Sweden, so you want to have open immigration from Somalia. It's like, no, being like Sweden in terms of the economic system does not imply being like Sweden in terms of the immigration system. So that's just bullshit right there. That entire argument is bullshit. And also, have you seen America lately? It has a lot of immigrants too. And frankly, America has a much higher crime rate than Sweden does. And frankly, I do think the economic system plays a part there. I think, regardless of demographics, I think that having an excessively free market economy will lead to higher crime rates because there will be higher rates of dire poverty. This is true in a 100% white country. It's true in a 100% non-white country. It's true in any country, regardless of demographics. Like, yes, certain demographics commit more crime than others. However, I think all things the same, the economic system does affect the crime rate. Like, if you create a society where a huge number of people are literally starving or borderline starving, there's going to be more crime. Now, that's being said, I don't think, obviously race plays a part too. Obviously demographics play a huge part. But at the same time, like, I think if you have two countries with the same demographics, the economic system will impact quality of life also. And I think there's a reason why, despite France, France has crime problems, but it doesn't have crime problems on the same scale that the US does. It might have the worst crime problems in Europe because it has the demographics closest to the US, but it's nowhere near as bad as the US in terms of at least murder, and I would assume probably like mugging as well. Like, I don't think there's any French city where you're as likely to get robbed as in Baltimore or Detroit or St. Louis. I could be wrong, but yeah, no, I think the economic system does play a part. Like, I think the fact that France is somewhat more socialist means that the poorer segments of society, while yes, there is a disproportionate amount of crime in France from the exact same demographics that commit disproportionate crime in the US. And yes, I do think it ties into genetics and other innate factors. But at the same time, the reason why the US has murder rates 10 times that of France in the worst cities, like, I'm pretty sure the murder rate in the US overall is like twice that of France, maybe 3 times as much. But compare the worst American cities, it's like 50 per 100,000, and the worst French cities are like 5 per 100,000. So it's like 10 times as high. So yeah, I think the economic system does impact social factors also. Yeah, anyway, another criticism that I get is that, oh, these European countries, their economies are going to collapse any day now. Like, trust me. Sweden, Netherlands, Belgium, you know, Norway, Finland, Germany, all these countries, their economy is going to collapse any day now because of their high taxes and their social programs. Any day now. And the people who say it's going to collapse any day now have been saying this for decades, and it still hasn't happened. Now, if these countries keep shutting down their economies because of COVID, then yes, it's very likely that they will collapse. But do I think that their more socialist economic systems will inherently lead to to their societies collapsing? No, I don't. And in fact, like, okay, I've read statistics about debt, and honestly, these statistics are very inconsistent. But from what I've seen, is the debt higher in these European countries, the public debt, compared to the U.S.? Yes and no. I've seen some statistics that say yes, but interestingly, the Netherlands is lower than the U.S. So, but irregardless, okay, regardless of whether debt is higher, like, to my understanding, it's possible for countries to some extent to manage their own debt. I think that's what Japan does. So the question is, like, is debt really the most relevant factor? And secondly, like, is the debt really that much lower, the public debt in the US? And thirdly, um, does accumulating a high rate of public debt inevitably lead to some sort of societal collapse that actually manifests itself in terms of actual real world social consequences, or does it not? I'm not entirely sure on the answer to these questions, but I do know that this supposed collapse that's always around the corner in these more socialist European countries, these northern European countries like Sweden, Scandinavian, German, Dutch speaking countries, and for that matter, even the UK and Ireland or France, like this idea that all these countries are on the verge of collapsing, and yet it never happens. So I'm skeptical on that argument too. To be honest, the U.S. looks like it's closer in terms of social collapse than these European countries. Now, obviously, social collapse and economic collapse they're related, but they're not entirely the same thing. So, lest I be a hypocrite, yeah, okay, fair enough. Those are to some extent two different things. However, which is Europe any closer to economic collapse than the U.S. is? I'm not sure on that. So I don't know. I'm skeptical about that argument. Another argument that I often hear is that if you increase taxes or if taxes are high, rich people will leave and your economy will become devastated. To that, I've actually looked up statistics, and many statistics say that European countries, like Northern European countries, the wealthier Northwestern European countries have probably on average, from what I saw, about 2/3 as many billionaires per capita compared to the US. So this idea that all the rich people are going to leave, I think is bullshit. I think it's largely a threat that rich people make. Kind of like how every time a Republican candidate wins, all these elites will threaten to move to Canada, and then they never do. I think it's the same thing. It's like the elites, yeah, they always threaten to leave whenever taxes get raised, but how many actually do it? I think a lot don't. I think it's a bluff largely. Like, and if the U.S. raised taxes, like, they're the ones with the lowest taxes of any developed first world country, I think. So where are these rich people going to move to? Are they going to move to some Caribbean island? Are they going to move their families to some third world country that has low taxes and live in like some sort of fortified gated community? I don't know. I kind of call their bluff on that one. Well, it's true that rich people will move their money out of the country if taxes are raised. To that, I would say, yeah, that's called tax evasion. That's a crime, and that should be punished more strictly. You see, one thing I don't understand about many of these arguments is the conflation between, like, saying on one hand the rich are holding us hostage, which is kind of true, but on the other hand kind of trying to justify it, saying that like the rich are right to do this. It's like, which one is it? Is it that they're holding us hostage and we have to do what they ask, otherwise they'll ruin us? Or is it that they are justified in doing this and they're having their wealth unjustly stolen. Like, I kind of feel like believing in both these things at the same time is a bit contradictory, and you kind of have to pick one or the other. Although I think both arguments may be flawed, but I'm just saying it's also like, which one is it? Um, so that brings me to my next one, which is actually one of the biggest arguments I want to address, which is the whole argument that taxation is theft. And I'm going to actually quote some things that I read that I previously posted about this, because I think I said it pretty bluntly there. Okay. Taxation is theft is a slogan repeated by the same people who are happy to be overcharged for food, housing, accommodations, etc. by the private sector. As long as it ain't the government, it ain't theft. And I think that's a very interesting argument. Here's something else that I said earlier about this. How is taxation theft any more than being overcharged for private goods is theft? If you want to argue that being overtaxed is theft, then that makes sense to an extent. But I would argue that being overcharged for private goods is theft just as much. But then you never see libertarians complain about that. And don't give me that crap about how taxation is forced, but buying private goods is voluntary. Many private goods are essentials that you need to survive and that are only sold by a select small number of corporations that essentially form a monopoly. Even if you buy these goods from a smaller business, bigger businesses often fundamentally dictate the market price. So how is that fundamentally any different? And furthermore, to add to what I've said there, when libertarians complain about taxation is theft because of government waste, because the government wastes some of that money on padding their own pockets and on corrupt bullshit, that is true. But how much money is wasted by CEOs? How much money is wasted by private entities padding their own pockets? How much do they inflate the price of private goods so they can be wealthier and have more stuff? So this argument that taxation is theft because the government wastes money, I would counter that private corporations tend to waste money probably at an even greater scale. So how is that not theft? Them overcharging for goods based on inflating their own salaries. That's like, I don't understand the distinction. I don't understand it. And again, when they say like, oh, but I consent to buying private goods, I don't consent to the government. It's like, but that's kind of bullshit, because you use government services because you have to. Like, you use the roads, you use the infrastructure, you use the water pipes, you use whatever. Same as you use certain private infrastructure because you have to. You use the phone lines, you use the internet, etc. I don't see what's really the difference. I mean, I guess theoretically you could argue that somebody who lives in the woods and does not use any kind of public or private utilities shouldn't have to pay taxes, but how many people actually do that? Like, live like a literal savage in the woods? Probably very few. So I'd say if you're using any type of societal service at all, if you're not living like a literal primitive in the woods, you should have to pay taxes, because you are participating in a society and you're benefiting from various institutions and services, whether directly or indirectly, because private companies also benefit from these institutions in order to produce whatever it is that they produce. So even by buying private goods, you are benefiting from the society you live in. You are benefiting from from government services and government functions indirectly, especially considering the amount of corporate welfare the government provides as well. So I would argue that by being part of society, you are implicitly consenting to pay taxes. And if you don't want to pay taxes, you should have to live like a savage in the woods, but that means you can't use any manufactured goods at all. You have to like make your clothes out of deer skin or something. And you have to eat what you hunt or forage in the woods. Like, you have to live like a literal savage in order for me to say that you're morally justified in not paying taxes. And again, how many, well, I mean, these libertarians, by using a computer to type this argument, they're they're automatically admitting that they're not living that way, because if they did live that way, they wouldn't have the computer or the smartphone or the internet in the first place. So that's my argument about taxation is theft. Okay, the final argument, this video is getting overlong. The final argument against free market libertarianism is the idea capitalism just works. It's like, yeah, it works. It works at creating a society with a Starbucks on every corner and a new Avengers movie in every multiplex. Does it work at creating a society with things like genuinely good art, architecture, culture, preservation of natural spaces, national parks, things like that? No, it doesn't. It doesn't work at preserving or creating beauty. What it works at is creating and preserving profits for a certain segment of the population. And what's profitable? Starbucks, McDonald's, and Avengers movies. Actually, now with COVID, I don't even know if Avengers movies are that profitable anymore. Now with COVID, it's Amazon that's profitable, and marijuana dispensaries on every corner. Yeah, that's been a great improvement for society. Yeah. So, yeah, my point is, does capitalism work? I mean, if you value any kind of art, culture, and beauty, then no. Unmitigated capitalism can create a hellish, like a hideous hellscape, an ugly world. So does communism, which is why we need a sensible system that is economically somewhere in between the two. So yeah, those are my arguments, my critiques against unmitigated free market capitalism, and my reasons why I'm not a libertarian. I guess you'd call, I don't know what term you want to call my ideology, but it is definitely not Americanism. It's not libertarianism. It's not unmitigated free market capitalism. Nor is it communism in the literal sense of the word, or Venezuelan style socialism, or anything like that. So I hope you found this video enlightening. It might be the last video I do in a while. I'm busy with a lot of other stuff lately, but I've been meaning to do this video for a long time. I could be wrong. Maybe I will do more videos soon, but we'll see. I can't promise that. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and see you guys later.